Good morning, everyone. My mom once told me that being a mom was hard because she had to raise kids and a full-grown man, too. So I didn't get that until after I got older. But little Johnny had finished the summer vacation and had gone back to school. And 2 days later, his teacher phoned his mother and told her that Johnny's misbehaving. Now, wait a minute. She said, I had Johnny with me for 3 months and never called you once about his misbehaving. But the one I like the best is the police recruit was asked this question. What would you do if you had to arrest your own mother? His answer, call for backup. Well, as we know, this is Mother's Day. And our scripture today is going to be Exodus 2. But I don't want this just to be a Mother's Day. But I think it should be a day set aside for all ladies that care and love children. And I hope today is a good day for all of our moms. And if your mother is still living, that you would find ways of honoring her today. And if you're a new mom, or you have a new mom in your life, as we heard before, they look forward to Mother's Day. And I have to say, this is Diane's first great Mother's Day. And so I thought that was pretty neat. And she's getting old. And also, if your mother has went to be with the Lord, I hope today you will find healing in the midst of all your sweet memories that you had of your mother and all the lessons that you learned from her. Now, I'm also very much aware of the fact that in our service today there may be some who are very uncomfortable about Mother's Day. As a matter of fact, probably some that decided or contemplated on not even coming today because they struggle with the fact that they are not mothers. But to you, I say you're welcome. And then you'll see as I get through the sermon why you are welcome. But today, it'll be in Exodus. And we're going through, see that there's 3 different examples of being a mother. And strangely enough, one of them is a biological mother. And the other 2 that we are going to look at, it'll be a little bit different than what you might have thought of before. But this morning, the first one is Jochebed. And if you go and look up how to pronounce her name, you're going to get 22 different ways of pronouncing her name. So I went with the American way. Jochebed. To give you a little bit of background on who she is and familiar with the story, at the end of Genesis, if you remember, a man by the name of Jacob, who God renamed Israel. He left the promised land, and with his 11 sons, he went to live in the land of Egypt, where his 12th son Joseph was, and Joseph was the governor of the entire land of Egypt. Of course, back in them days, there was a worldwide famine, and the Israelites were starving. But God made sure that his chosen people, Israel, wouldn't starve to death. So Jacob and his sons and their families packed up and they moved to Egypt, which the Bible says is about 70 of them. But now we're going to jump into Exodus. And between Genesis and Exodus, they say there was about 400 years that went by there. But in the beginning of Exodus, the Israelites had grown into about, according to the Bible, 600,000 of them in the land of Egypt there. But that day, the Pharaoh of Egypt didn't know about Joseph. He didn't know anything about him, and the Israelites scared him. And so he ordered this terrible decree. And we all remember what that is, to kill every male baby that there was. Or every Hebrew baby. So Pharaoh told the midwives back then that when they helped Hebrew ladies deliver, to just kill them if they were boys. And then let the girls live. So in Exodus 1, verse 22, I'll just read it real quick. It says, "So Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, Every son who was born shall be cast into the river, and every daughter you shall save alive." So that's the background on our first mom. Now in Exodus 2, this is a little more about what they say about Jochebed. And it starts in verse 1, "And a man of the house of Levi went and took a wife, a daughter of Levi. So the woman conceived and bore a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful child, she hid him 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, dabbed it with asphalt and pitch, put the child in it, and laid it in the reeds by the river bank. And his sister stood off afar to watch and to know what would be done with him." So from this passage that we read right here, we really still don't know what the mother's name is. Don't even know what the baby's name is. But I think we all know, because we know the story, that his name is Moses. But not everybody remembers his mother's name. And actually, you have to go to the book of Numbers to find out what her name is. And in Numbers 26:59, it says, "The name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. And she bore Amram, Aaron, Moses, and Miriam, their sister." So you see, we really don't know too much about Jochebed, except she was probably born in Goshen, Egypt. We know that she and her husband both belonged to Levi. And we also know in the Hebrew her name means the glory of Yahweh. But before we look into more of Jochebed's life, let's read. I want to read the rest of this passage to see what happens. And starting in verse 5 through 9. "Then the daughter of the Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when they saw the ark among the reeds, she went to her maid to get it." Or she sent her maid to get it. "And when she opened it up, she saw the child, and behold, the baby wept. So she had compassion on him and said, 'This is one of the Hebrews' children.' Then the sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?' And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go.' So the maiden went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. Don't you just love it how God's always there? God made a way for Jochebed to nurse her own child until he was weaned. So she had time to be with that child. And I was reading that back then they nursed their children up till they were 4 to 5 years old. So that was 4 to 5 years that Jochebed got to spend with her son, taking care of him. And so I'd have to say that she probably influenced Moses in quite a few different ways. Well, one of the things that gets me, how many of you mothers would take your baby boy, put him in a little boat and send him out on the, I'd like to say Muscatatuck River, but we'll go a little bigger than that. No, would put your baby boy in a homemade boat and send him on his way. You know, he should have died. He should have been killed, but he wasn't. Jochebed was able to hide him for 3 months before she had to do something. But to put him in the Nile River, people, do you know that the Nile River has some of the deadliest snakes in the world in it? It has crocodiles. No alligators, they have crocodiles in the Nile River. Currents can change real quick in that river. It's a dangerous river. And it amazes me that they bathed in the river because it was a dirty river. And I guess it still is a dirty river. But who would want to put their baby boy in something like that? I don't think Jochebed done it just on the whim. I think she had divine guidance through this whole thing. God took care of it for her. She took a great chance of putting her son out there. She already had another son and she had a daughter. They think the daughter was the oldest, then Aaron, and then Moses. But her children, some of the accomplishments that all of her children accomplished is amazing. You know, a lot of people, their children won't even read the Bible. And here she had a child that wrote it. And another child that she became a prophetess, you know. And another one that was the high priest, first high priest ever. What a family records they had. But it just amazed me. Why didn't God just simply say to Moses and he just grew up? Why wasn't it done that way instead of going through all this way? I can't answer that. I really can't. But I can tell you this, that God was in charge of it. That's why it worked out. I think another thing about Jochebed too was that she, there's not much about her at all in the Bible. But from just looking at her children, she must have encouraged each child to do what they needed to do and to help them to do what they needed to do because they grew up to be God-fearing people. And in this day and age, what's it take to raise a child, to be a God-fearing child? It takes a lot. It takes a lot. Now, did Jochebed just walk down to the river, toss him in? No. It says in the Bible that she placed him in a pretty good spot to where, I guess she probably scouted out to Pharaoh's daughter a few times and found out where she bathed and how all that went. But she got him in the right spot so Pharaoh's daughter would find Moses. But here comes the hardest thing, I think, was that, or maybe the bravest for Jochebed, was actually letting him go. She let him go. I know moms have a hard time of letting children go. I walked my daughter down the aisle, and down the aisle we went, and we got about 3/4 of the way down, and I could already hear her mother crying because her mother didn't want to let her go yet, but it was time to. I remember my father telling my mother, dry it up. He said, dry it up, Mavis. He'll be back. When I went into the service. Mom didn't want me to go. But I find it that the mothers that can tell their children to go and to blossom and, do good works and stuff are very strong. They're good, strong mothers. But there's another thing that happened to Moses. Jochebed was his mother. But Pharaoh's daughter adopted him. He said, I'll take him and I'll raise him as my own. And she's actually the one that named him. Because Moses, I guess, in Hebrew, means to draw out of the river. And that's what she done with Moses. And she took him, and he got treated really nice. He lived well. They don't say much about Pharaoh's daughter. Matter of fact, I don't think they even said, I couldn't find a name for her anywhere. There's a few that think that she was a princess, that they built some temples in her name, in her honor, and I cannot pronounce that name unless you want to just call it Hatshepsut. That's what her name was. But anyway, she raised Moses. So he got the influence from Pharaoh's side of it too. From the Hebrew side and from the Pharaoh side, the Egyptian side. He got both sides as he was growing up. And so it goes to show that you may not be a biological mother, but you can still be a mother through adoption. And sometimes adoption is hard. It's very hard. I know Diane and I tried a few times, and it was heartbreaking. It was not the best years of our lives, but it was heartbreaking for us to be told that we weren't good enough. So it gets hard. And so I'm glad, anyway, Pharaoh's daughter took over and raised Moses up. And then we all know what happens. And one day he was walking, and he seen where an Egyptian was beating up a Hebrew, and Moses took care of that real quick and buried the evidence and then ran. So he wouldn't be prosecuted. But before I go any further, there's one thing I looked into, and that's adoption and foster children. And this is what I found. You realize that every 2 minutes there's a child that goes into foster care? Every 2 minutes in the United States of America. In the year 2024, in the state of Indiana, roughly 12,000 foster kids. 2025, roughly 14,000 foster kids. In 2025, there was 3,000 foster homes. You divide that into that, and it's not very good. Foster homes can't take care of all of them. So there's a lot of kids that get left out. And also looked as of April this year, April 26, there's 6,412 Christian churches in the state of Indiana. 6,412. Roughly 3 million Christians attend them churches. If that's true, why are we lacking foster care? We have a niece that is a foster parent, and she has to tell them no, because they would have 15 kids on her all the time if she didn't. So think about that. You can be a biological mother, you can be an adopted mother,